What's happening, everyone? Thank you for joining me for episode 80 of Shift. I can't believe we're almost to episode 100. It's only 4 weeks away. Today, my guest is Dr. JC Doornick, who is known as Dragon with the podcast Rise Up with Dragon, also on Clubhouse, YouTube, all the places. Dragon and I met through Clubhouse, actually. We met through some chat rooms and we just started talking to one another. I really, really like a lot of the things he's got to say. He's a big fan of the Daily Stoicism, Buddhist practice. His wife is a meditation instructor, and we just hit it off on a lot of different topics in the conversations we had. And I just knew that I had to have him on the podcast to have you guys learn more about his point of view, his view on life. And we just had a really great conversation. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you check out his podcast as well, Rise Up with Dragon. Thanks, and here you go.
Awesome. Good to meet you, man.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you, man, and thank you for taking some time to play.
Oh, my pleasure, man. I like playing.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
That's a big part of shifting is like synchronistically meeting people too.
Yeah. Oh, big time. We talk a lot in my household and in the work that I do about collisions and how important it is to just show up with no expectation.
Love that word. Love the word collision.
Yeah, just see what happens, and inevitably there's something positive that comes out of it. There's a connection, there's a meeting, there's even just a thoughtful nugget that you, months later, years later, you go, oh, that makes perfect sense now, where maybe in the moment you don't know. So yeah, I think you and I align in a lot of stuff. I'm a huge fan of the Daily Stoic, Obstacle is the Way, and Ryan Holiday stuff. And actually got sober.
He just came out with a new book today.
I saw the dude writes like crazy. I don't know.
Yeah. What's funny is he's like the world's greatest know-it-all about Stoicism, but he's a bit of a workaholic.
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, I love his stuff. And you know what I think is great. Now, maybe we dive into this a little bit. Like there are people who present really great content that I love, and they also present information or stuff that I'm like, I don't know how I feel about like that. And I can still listen to all of it. Well, you said something in one of your podcasts that I really dug about looking at all sides equally and kind of unlocking that thoughtful process. And I sort of try to live that way. So it's one of the things that you've said where I'm like, I really want to talk to this guy some more. And I think the listeners of this podcast would appreciate, because I talk a lot about Buddhist thought. I talk a lot about Stoic philosophy.
Nice.
And all of those things, and sort of controlling the controllables, what we can do, and recognizing when and how we can sort of manage those emotions. And you got some
I'm getting ready to publish my 8 years of work. That's all about that.
Yeah. So I really just want to kind of dive into like, who you are, what you're about. I know you've struggled in the past with.
Yeah. How do I walk around and call myself Dragon?
Yeah. Like what's the genesis of that, and like how did you land in a place where you're able to navigate all these different things in what sounds like a relatively peaceful and calm.
Yeah, I'm my wife and I don't talk about this in podcast land too often, but my wife and I own an international coaching company. I have about 8,000 people that work for me, and we're in Asia and here, and it's a very, very big company, very successful. But at the same time, we're minimalists. And, and that's not just like what's in our house and how we live and the cars we drive. It's also the concept of we only allow things that actually matter in our life.
Yeah.
So the idea of what you would do if you became financially free, we're doing the complete opposite of what other people think. Like we're going to have to like store our money like Heisenberg in a storage unit or something, because we don't spend money on stuff. We try to bless other people, and I've done a lot of philanthropy, but we don't need money.
Yeah.
So for us, but here's what's weird about that is I think that's why we make so much, because we don't go after it. We go after the thing that creates it.
Yeah.
And that's service, you know?
Yeah. I love that. And I think why I'm really drawn to a lot of stuff you talk about is I feel very much the same way. Yeah. We were on a rafting trip yesterday, and our river guide was talking about how he came to this country from Uzbekistan, and he did about 2 years of like the American dream, right? He was going to school and getting a job and doing all the things, and then he just fell in love with the river and decided I'm gonna live my dream. And I was like, man, I wish that was the American. I wish that what you're describing to me right now was what people consider to be the American dream, because that's how my wife and I have chosen to live. And I think we dive into the push pull, the balance of like, we don't need money, and yet we need money, and on, you know, in a practical way. But I think when people start to move toward living in purpose and living to love one another and take care of one another, we stop worrying about where that return on investment comes from. Because you and I know that we get that. We know it comes back, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but at the same time, you know, I also embrace the fact that tomorrow I could fuck it all up and change my mind about everything, because what's so awesome about life is that we actually get to choose our fantasy. You know, we actually get to decide if it's a good day or a bad day, if I want to be nice or mean, you know. So just like if I'm down in the dumps in life, I have to know that I can choose to change that situation.
Yep.
But at the same time, when I'm riding high, I have to know that I can choose to ride low again. You know what I mean? So
100%.
Because they're both omnipresent. So you know, I haven't figured out, I know this sounds crazy, I haven't figured out what's better, to have a shitty life or a fantastic life, because they're both equally part of my experience.
I love it.
I mean, of course I can tell you I'd much rather have a fantastic life.
Yeah. I mean, but that's really fascinating.
But if I say, oh, this is the best, well, then when this happens, I'm fucked.
Yeah. And you can only have the best if you've experienced the opposite, right? Like you don't have a frame of reference. You have
to be able to embrace the obstacle, the suck, you know?
Yeah.
Let me share with you the whole dragon thing. So when I was, you know, a young kid, and I think a big part of my story was something that happened, you know, a couple of things that happened to me back in the days. But when I was about 35 years old, all of a sudden I shifted, right? There's your word.
I love it.
I shifted from being, because I practiced chiropractic for about 17 years, very successful at it. But when I got out of school going into chiropractic, I was the most confident person that you'd ever met, you know, borderline cocky. Nothing, I feared nothing. And I was just like Tony Robbins' son, you know what I mean? And then something happened to me where all of a sudden, in a split second, I don't know when it happened, but I all of a sudden just completely lost all my confidence. I couldn't tell you why, but I just one day lost all my confidence, experienced anxiety and panic for the first time, which was unknown to me, you know, which is the danger of being a super confident person.
Sure.
Is to not know the dark side. So long story short, I went to this place that everybody fears. You know, I went to the dark side, where I just couldn't figure out any way to get out of it other than to turn my lights out. And this happened to me at about 35 years old. 35? Yeah, something like that. I'm 50. No, not 35. 28. What am I talking about? 28 years old. This one had happened to me. So I just progressively bought into that, and I just became this massively depressed person that could not even go to work anymore. And I was just about to start my whole career, and everybody knew that I was going to be the most successful person they knew. And here I am, not even showering and, you know, contemplating suicide. So my parents, took over, and they're like, hey, he's never taken our help before, but we got to help him now. So I go, and when you're hanging by a cliff, anybody that gives you a hand, you'll take it. So my mom ends up taking me to see a therapist, which I had never been to a therapist before, because I thought that, when you're a cocky, confident guy, you don't need a therapist.
Yeah.
So my mom takes me to a therapist, and I'm sitting there. My mom's waiting out in the car. I'm like 28 years old. I'm a man. My mom's sitting out in the car, and I'm sitting there across from the person that I never wanted to be in front of my whole life. And we start this conversation. And long story short, she starts asking me questions. And I didn't really understand how she was doing this, but she was asking me questions that led to this moment where she says, well, when did this all start? Because there's two types of shifts. One is when you shift from dark to light, but I'm telling you about shifting from light to dark.
Yeah.
Right. So she started asking me these questions, and I said, well, it happened about a month ago, and, I was on my way. And she goes, okay, so July? And I go, yeah. She goes, well, what's the significance of July? And I go, well, it's my birthday. My birthday's in July. And she goes, oh, okay. Well, tell me about your birthday. And I said, oh, I hate my birthday. I don't like my birthday. I'm not a big fan. I don't like people giving me presents or anything like that. And she just looked at me and she went, like that. And I was like, myself, it was like I made a distinction. So she said, well, why is that? And I go, I don't know, just don't like my birthday. So then she dug a little deeper and she started asking questions. And she said, tell me about your family. And I told her about my sister. And then I told her about my mom and my dad. And she said, are they together? And I said, no, they're divorced. And she goes, when did they get divorced? Right. And then I said, well, when I was younger. And she said, how old? And I said, 11 years old. Right. And I don't know what's about to happen, but I'm about to turn into Shazam here in a second. So what she helped me realize is that when I was 11 years old and I walked in the door of my house on my birthday, expecting the whole birthday thing to ensue, all my friends were going to come over, we were going to go bowling and all that stuff. I walked in the door and my mom is sitting at the base of the stairs in her underwear crying. Now I'd completely forgotten about this, right? So I said, Mom, what's wrong? And she looks at me and she says, your father's leaving me. Your father's leaving us. Now, my dad, bless him, was never home. He's always working. And so for me at the time, I didn't know what he's leaving us means. I just thought maybe, but I kind of knew, but at 11 years old, how do you handle that?
Yeah.
But I saw my mom was upset. And the main thing that I realized is my birthday just got bumped, and at 11, that's about as, so I said, can I go play with my friends? And I had to go explain to my friends that my birthday was called off.
Yeah.
So now what I did in that moment is I somehow managed to pretend that never happened. And then I started this process of pretending and getting rid of it, but progressively hating my birthday more and more and more and not knowing why, until I became, until I felt the darkness. So that day in the therapist office, she brought me back to life. In my book, I call that moment a snap, which is another form of a shift. Where 27 years of, 16, 17 years of my life just pop in a snap, unfolded in front of me. And in that split second, I completely became clear, snapped out of the darkness, no more suicidal thoughts, confidence back, not cocky, but confidence back.
Yeah.
And I made a decision that day that I was A, never going back to the dark, and B, I was going to dedicate my life to helping make sure that nobody else does.
Wow.
So that's what happened to me that day. And everything that you and I have been talking about, bits and pieces, is an extension of that. I just went into this service mode. Now, the reason why I call myself Dragon is because if you look at the history of dragons are an interesting, now I'm not talking about kimono dragons. I'm talking about like fire breathing dragons that pillage. Yeah. They've never actually existed. They're mythical, right?
Yep.
A lot of cultures have talked about them, this myth of the dragon, but they've never actually existed. So who I have become today, I used to look at as a mythical creature.
Yeah.
So that's how I became the dragon. So Rise Up with Dragon, my podcast, is another extension of me helping unlock some things and making people think, and helping people escape from prison. And now you know why.
Yeah, I love it. And I really think there's a couple of things I'm curious about. One, when exactly is your birthday, if you don't mind sharing?
July 17th. I'm a Cancer.
So my birthday is July 16th.
Yeah, of course it is.
And
let me ask you a question about that.
Yeah, go for it.
Does that surprise you?
That our birthdays are so close?
Yeah.
Not surprising. It's more of like and there's
Makes
another
complete sense to me.
Yeah. There's another like, oh, there it is.
Well, think about what we're doing right now. And this is important for listeners to hear. Like, so you and I have come together and we're doing this podcast, and obviously we have a lot in common. Now we're understanding a little bit more why we have a lot in common. Right. We're going down the same path. We have the same interests and all that stuff. I'm sure you picked out some things in my story that you could relate to and all that 100%. Stuff. So now the average ordinary person at the end of this conversation would say, holy shit, no way. Our birthday's the same, almost the same day. But for me, I could have almost predicted it, because of what I was hearing you say.
Yeah.
And it happens to me all the time.
Yeah, it's amazing. See, and I also I don't celebrate my birthday. It's interesting. Like, so probably in the last 4 or 5 years, I've gotten to a place where it doesn't bother me, right? Like, and my excuse has always been, so like my parents separated when I was 2 years old. My birth mom passed away when I was 3.5, and I went back to live with my dad. And my dad, for probably the first 2 or 3 years that I lived back home with him, we celebrated my birthday on July 17th. And then when my stepmother, his new wife, adopted me officially, we got my birth certificate, and he was like, oh shit, your birthday's the 16th. So it was kind of like, it was just not even important, right? So like I've done some of that same work of like, why is it that I don't care? I don't want to be the center of attention. And it's kind of like, because I feel like, and it's all things that we feel. We don't know what's exactly true, but like, I felt like for me, it was just kind of like I was made at a young age to feel like it wasn't even really that important. Like the guy that should know didn't even know what day it was. Right. So as an adult, I've just sort of landed in this place of like, I celebrate with my wife, with my kids. I'm comfortable being the center of attention on my birthday. And at the same time, for the last 3 or 4 years, her and I just leave town. We go on a trip. We go do that thing.
And I resonate with that. But at the same time, you probably can understand that you got a lot of work to do. Oh,
100%. 100%. Yeah. So because I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh, there's another layer I probably want to look into. And that's why I do this.
Just imagine, I was at one of our big conventions one time, and I was on the dance floor, right? We're having like our after party, and there's thousands of people there.
Sure.
And while I was dancing, this couple who knew me because I was speaking on stage, but I didn't know who they were. They had their little daughter. Her name was Aubrey. I never met him before in my life. And for whatever reason, this girl runs up to me. She's like 6 or 7 and grabs onto my leg. And naturally her parents came over and said, "Hey, sweetie, leave him alone, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh no, it's fine. I love kids," and all that stuff. And they pulled her away, and there was just some strange thing that was going on where she was like, "No," she wanted to be with me. So I just figured, it kind of made me go, huh. But anyway, the next day I was walking down the hallway and boom, sure enough, here she comes again. She comes and she grabs onto my leg again, as if she was like, I started to wonder if maybe her parents were abusing her or something like that.
Sure,
You know what I mean?
She's
like
looking for a safe place.
She was trying to tell me something. So anyway, it was at the end of the convention and I'm with our team. We're having breakfast in the morning. And and I was telling them about the story. I was like, yeah, this is kind of weird. This is kind of happening. And then across the room, I see the two parents and her sitting there, and she's staring at me, this little girl. And I'm sitting there in front of my team, and all of a sudden, boom, I figured it out. And I go, "Guys, the story I just told you, that's the girl." And I go, "Watch what's about to happen right now." And they're like, "What is he talking about? Is he smoking pot?" So I look to Aubrey across the breakfast area. I go, "Sweetie, come here." And she runs up to me and hugs me. And her parents come running after her. I go, "When's your birthday?" And she says, "July 17th. And I looked at everybody and I go, as if I'm like Nostradamus.
Yeah.
But I knew.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And the connections there are so cool to see, and to be able to tap into that, right? Because I think it's
happening all the time, but that's the key is, can you tap into it?
Yeah. I think so many people one of the things that I talk about a lot is like the conditioning that we've had. And this is kind of the thing, honestly, that I think made me, on whatever clubhouse I was in, you were speaking and you said something and I was like, oh shit, I wish it was a rewind, but like, I want to go back. And you talk about it in your podcast though, but it's this concept of like learned behavior, sort of how, and not just learn behavior from the mother, father, teacher, preacher that you talk about that I really love, because I think so many of the challenges that people face today are
programmers.
Yeah. They're programmed and they don't understand that they're programmed. And so a lot of times we default to like, well, it's just who I am. And it's like, no, it's who you're choosing to be, because you're choosing not to look at the programming and go, okay, but
that's the difference between your conscious and unconscious state.
100%.
When you're unconscious, when people think, okay, I'm unconscious, meaning I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just on autopilot. But what people don't really understand, and what I try to get them to think about, is there's something else going on when you're unconscious and you're running your default mode program, which is not really programmed by you. It's programmed by your experience, your mother, father, teacher, preacher, and your past yesterday, right? Which actually has nothing to do with where you've decided to go. So if you're unconscious to that and you're not even aware of the process, then you're allowing this program to call shots that are supposed to take you somewhere where those things don't mean anything. So the real goal is, if you share a story or you share a concept like we just shared right there, and you can get somebody to just stop for a second and recognize it makes sense that I'm running a program. That's the first step, is they just go, holy shit, I forgive me, for I know not what I do. And from that place, you start questioning everything.
Yeah, 100%. For me, that's the key, right? Is the stop and recognize that you don't know what you don't know, and then begin to explore and figure out. And I've had people, my story is similar, my dad didn't leave, but he was definitely gone a lot, and there was abuse, and there was all the things that you hear about. And we're even close in age. I mean, I just turned 47. So, we're similar upbringing, I'm sure, in that time of life. And people often ask me, they're like, well, what are you and your dad like now? Is it stressful? Is it tenuous? I'm like, no, my dad and I are great, because we've healed that and we've worked through that stuff and we figured it out. I often say the only thing that I wish had been done different, if I was to dwell on that, because a lot of it, I land in that space of like, well, I wouldn't be here if not for the things that I experienced. But if I was to look at something different and what I chose to do differently with my children, because we have a large family, and generational healing and like shifting those paradigms is a big thing for us, was recognizing that I don't have tools and going in search of them, and like almost radically challenging everything. Like,
well, what's interesting about what you just said is when you say recognizing that I don't have tools, you actually do have them. You just don't know how to access them yet.
Right. Sure.
Right. Because I mean, think about it. We all come equipped with everything that we need, but we just don't even know our capabilities.
Yeah.
So as you start thinking, it's more like you look down and say, oh, I never knew that was there.
Right.
And that's part of the process, because there's another side of this is everybody goes on this journey to find the tools, but all they really find is things that unlock something that was already there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think that's a really great.
This is you ever heard of this book?
Oh, love it.
Okay, love it. So I mean, like what he talks about is what you just said. He talks about the space between stimulus and response, which is everything that I'm teaching in my book.
Yeah.
If you can slow the process down before you respond to something, that's where the win is. So it's just about, once again, becoming conscious, thinking about things, and cognitively distancing yourself.
Interesting story about that. He talks about that space. That quote that's attributed to him is not from him and isn't in that book. I've dug, I actually found it because I quoted that in my book. And I was like doing some background research and wanted to make sure that I had everything, accurate.
Yeah.
It turns out that like Stephen Covey attributed that quote to him, but then when somebody went back to look at it, they were like,
well, from what I understand,
that like it's this whole fascinating story, and I'm sure none of us have all the bits and pieces to it.
Well, I mean, who made up quotes? Probably Marcus Aurelius,
right?
Everybody steals everything, but if you look up that quote on Google, he does get credit for it, but it's not in the book. I think he used that. I think he used it to reference what he was trying to say.
Yeah, no, and it's one of my favorite thought processes. And I wonder, how do you walk the balance between sort of coaching somebody in that, in like a conversation like this, where it's like, I'm not necessarily a client of yours, right? Like, but we're talking and you're clearly comfortable going, hey, you recognize you have work to do in that space, right? And I'm sure that's partially because you can tell that that's an area that I'm comfortable being in.
Yeah, and I also resonate with it.
Yeah, and I wonder sometimes, because I catch myself getting in trouble or maybe overstepping my bounds, where I want to tell somebody, hey, that's really not what you like. My wife was having a conversation with somebody today, and I was overhearing some of it, and I was like biting my tongue because I wanted to interject and be like, Carrie, that shit she's saying isn't what's true. Like, there's tools there, right? So how do you kind of walk that balance and gently guide people into becoming more aware? Because I feel like almost like a responsibility to people to be like, oh, if you would just see this way, like without judgment around it. So like,
what's funny about us, and I mean humans, Martin Luther King used to talk about this thing called the drum major instinct. Okay. And just go look that up and listen to his speech. It's really cool. We all have this instinct to lead, right? And it all has to do with us wanting to validate our position and significance in life. So, sometimes you have to, when you're in that mode, even when you're like thinking about getting in that mode, which we call hero mode, you just kind of have to turn around and see that your cape is out. You know what I mean? And, it's like, and the first thing that I do when I get like that, because you can't, in Buddhism, do you know about the two arrows?
The two arrows?
Yeah.
No, maybe.
This is super cool. So when it comes to the idea of like our thoughts and our feelings,
okay,
we can't avoid them. When something happens, no matter what your tools and skills are and philosophies, you feel, right?
100%. Yeah.
So your knee-jerk reaction from caveman evolution is you will feel and you will think. Now, the goal is, remember, the stimulus, that's your knee-jerk reaction, but the space is how you respond. But you can't avoid how you think and you feel. So the goal is to recognize that you're just thinking and feeling and being an observation of that. So in Buddhism, they talk about the fact that when it comes to pain and things like that, there's two arrows associated with it. So the first arrow is unavoidable. So what that means is when something happens, I call it a happening, you're going to get shot by the first arrow, meaning you're going to feel unavoidable. But the second arrow is the one that you have the opportunity to shoot your own self in your foot. And that is based on your response and the value you give. So here's my point. When I'm dealing with a client and that moment comes up where, like I'm Spock and I'm like, that's highly illogical what you're saying. Like, and I want to cite like something and tell them that they're wrong.
Yes.
So the first thing I have to do is I have to recognize that I might be wrong. So one of the things that is really interesting, like, I become very good friends with Donald Hoffman, who wrote the book, The Case Against Reality, who's probably one of the smartest men in the world. He'll prove to you with science and mathematics that this is all bullshit. It's all simulation, right? So when you start to learn that stuff, then you start to have to question whether or not you are actually right. So that's the first thing that I do, because that stops me from trying to save them, because that's not what they're looking for. They're not looking to be saved. They're actually protecting their position of what they think is right. So there's two people being right. Nobody ever gets anywhere for being right, because everybody's right. You're right, I'm right. So the first thing I need to do is basically look at them and go, yeah, I understand what you're saying, rather than tell them they're wrong. So all I need to do then is say, so my question is where do you want to go? Where do you, because I just need to know, like, okay, I hear what you're saying, you suck at this, and, you think you know how to do it your own way, and you're not going to listen to anybody else that's already done it successfully. You're going to do it a different way. You're going to build an airplane in the sky. Okay, I got that, right? And maybe you can build an airplane in the sky. I don't know. I've never done it. But my question is where do you want to go? What's your desired state and why? So I get them talking about that, because remember, I'm in service to them.
Right.
Should they want my help? I can't come in and help. Sometimes the cat wants to stay in the tree.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is I just want to say that, there's a ladder right there, and then walk away. So what I want to do is say, what do you want and why? And then something flips a switch in their brain where they get off of their position, and I can get off of saving them from their position, and the focus becomes where they want to go. And then once they decide where they want to go and what's important to them, then I can ask them, what's your strategy? What are your thoughts, feelings, and actions that are going to support and leverage getting you there? That's when they figure out that they need to change from the way they're thinking, so I never have to correct them or save them. What I need to do is guide them to this place where they recognize that change is required.
Well, and it sounds like what you're doing is you're helping them unlock the tools within, right? Like you're helping them to navigate.
And sometimes I realized that I was about to tell them to do something that would have screwed them up even more. Because I have to remind myself, even though you and I are successful people, You know, the truth is we're not very talented. We've just got experience.
Yeah.
You know, and we follow through and we work hard. So who are we to tell somebody who could be greater than us?
Yeah.
Right. Because I'm sitting at the proverbial top of a mountain right now, but I struggled to get here. Why would I tell somebody what to do? Maybe they won't have to struggle so much. So it's just an interesting headspace to be in, to listen more than talk. And what I find is that people always figure it out. The thing that I wanted to save them from, they figure it out on their own.
Yeah. And they maybe didn't need saving from, or maybe that experience was the thing that pushed them toward.
Who knows? Just like you and I.
Yeah. So I had a thought and it went away.
Now I have to do that in like 2 minutes because we can't talk about it as long as you and I do.
Sure.
So I usually just, make some sounds and say, tell me more,
Yeah. I love the phrase, tell me more. I think it's one of the most powerful things when somebody says something where you're like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Or what are they thinking? Like, if you can just rephrase, if you can remember to just go, wow, tell me more. And
or another one is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. See, and have you seen there's a film called Captain, I'm gonna butcher this. It's about the family lives in a bus and he unschools and it's like Captain Jack or something like that. He scolds his children for using the word interesting as a response because he calls it a cop out, which is funny. So whenever I hear someone say that, I immediately think they're just telling me to go away or I completely disagree because they're like, well, that's interesting.
But here's what's interesting is if I say something to you and you say interesting and you don't give me an opinion or validate what I said is right, and I don't like it, then what I'm doing is I'm just walking around putting exclamation points behind things to validate that I know things, right? Yeah. So, but if I'm open and you're open, all I really want from you is to know that you're listening.
Yeah.
Right. So if when people get pissed off because they say things like, I'll give you an example. My brother, he's a little far out and he comes up with these ideas of he's going to do all these things that my logical brain says, no, you're not. It's impossible. Right. But I can't say that. So when he tells me these elaborate stories, my response is I go, huh. And then he goes, what do you mean? Huh? Like you have nothing else to say? And I'm like, well, not yet. I'm just listening and I'm processing. Yeah. You've told me a lot of stuff. Can I have some time to think about it? And it drives him nuts because what he wants is a phony answer for me to say,
he wants a cheerleader.
That's so awesome. I'm so proud of you for talking shit.
Yeah. Can't wait to see it. Yeah. You're amazing. It's so good. Yeah. They're looking for that validation. And when you're like, wow, okay, I'm not really sure that's going to play out. Let me just not say anything.
I don't like to waste people's time. Yeah.
Yeah. So does that go back to like the minimalist thing? Because for me, like when you said Absolutely. Like I'm only going to bring things in that matter, it made me instantly think of the sort of stoic, thought of, you have the right to have no opinion. Like there's a lot going on in the world, and I used to be like, it all matters. I have to know everything about what's going on in Afghanistan and over here and over there and all the different, things. And now I'm sort of like, it matters in the sense that my heart breaks for people who hurt. And that's about as much energy as I care to give it because it doesn't move or matter in a sense that like I can do something about it. And I'm going to just kind of go down this rabbit hole of emotion and thought and feeling. And so I'm curious if that's sort of the same thought process, because, I know that you've done, and this is probably something you don't talk about a whole lot, but like you do a ton of humanitarian work from what I understand. Yeah. And so I know that like you've got a huge heart and it's very service-minded. So what's that balance there? Because like, it's like, you don't need the money and you only bring in the things that matter. And it's just such a big world out there.
Yeah.
Right? Like
So,
there's so much.
for one thing, I'm at a place in my life where I'm just 100% transparent, and I'll debate this with anybody. The reason why people do humanitarian work is it's a selfish action. And everybody goes, what? Like these people that do mission work, because I was in Haiti for the earthquakes and all that stuff, right? And everybody praised me for it until the day I realized that I was doing it to feel better about myself.
100%.
Right. And that's you want to grow, admit to that. Admit that you don't think, say, or do anything, including going to church, without some sort of a value for yourself. Right. So, and I always joke in my talks, I go, I would assume that Mother Teresa is the most selfish person in the world, because she devoted her whole life to helping others. Right. So a couple things that you said. So the idea of being a minimalist, beyond the fact that, if you come visit us and spend time with us, what you'll see is that we don't have anything that doesn't matter. Like, to the point where, like on my desk, sometimes I'll pick up this wire here and I'll be like, okay, so this is a C drive and this is a USB. When's the last time I used that? I don't need this anymore. Right. So I will give this away. Right. So that's part of being a minimalist. It's not about not having nice things, because we own a home in France. We have a house in South Africa. We travel first class all over the world, but we don't have fancy things. That's not important. But what minimalism mainly means from a Stoic principle is, and this is what I teach. I teach this system called the interface response system, because what we're doing all day, all human beings, we're interfacing with things. Yep. We're interfacing with scenarios, people, objects, this interview, this microphone, oxygen. We're interfacing all day. So the interface response has to do with that space. What I'm doing is as I interface, I'm perceiving, and I'm aware that my perception is based on my program. So I have to be aware of that. And I've got this opportunity to think about how I'm going to respond to what I'm interfacing with, right? So the minimalist concept is this: if I know where I'm going and what matters and what doesn't, while I'm in the interface response, I have the opportunity to evaluate things like what matters, what doesn't, what's in my control, what's not, right? That's why we don't watch the news. The other thing is who gets in, what gets in, and what doesn't. So that's how we minimize drama, we minimize time suck, we minimize anything that is not in support of where we're going, including family members, right? Now, the people that know us fucking drives them crazy, because what's interesting is when you get 100% lean and you're only doing things that actually matter, it drives people crazy, because all everybody else is trying to do is matter. Mm-hmm. When they try to come in, I did a podcast episode called The Bouncer. And the analogy is that I'm a bouncer at the door of my club. The club is my life and what matters most. So I'm there and I'm checking IDs, and I'm checking the IDs of everything I'm interfacing with. And I decide who's in and who's out, who's on the list. Yeah. So I'm very often telling people, you're not on the list. You're not on the list. I love it. And when you're waiting online to validate who you are to get in the club, and the bouncer says you're not coming in, it drives you crazy, which I understand, because it highlights the fact that according to me, you don't matter. Yeah. But you do matter, but I just don't, at this time, you're not part of the equation. So you were saying something else before, and the other thing I wanted to say on that was there's three words that are super, super important when you're interfacing with people. And you make a statement like, sorry, I can't help you, or no thanks, right? So one of the things that drives people crazy about that is because they have this black and white, end all concept that when you say that, it means never. So I always like to, whenever I make a statement, I always add to it three words: at this time. So when I tell you, if you say, JC, I've got this great opportunity and I know it's great for you and you're super excited about it, and I listen and I allow myself to access a logical, rational part of my brain in the space, right? That's what my system's about. And I say, I'm going to take a pass on it, right? And then you're like, what? I mean, like, then I could say, well, at this time, I've got some other things going on. So what's cool is that that's how I can say, hey, we can talk about it some other time, but not right now.
Yeah.
So that's how I let people off the hook.
Yeah. I like that. There's a training that I did that has a similar concept to the bouncer. And it talks about kind of having signs up, right? Like we have like these individual sort of like energy bubbles, right? And then like, and you want to try to expand your energy to make yourself bigger and put that out. But also at the same time, there's like groups of people that are allowed inside certain bubbles. And that closest one, there's signs that are like, look, in this bubble, we're honest, we're this, we're that. Like that's your closest sort of thing. And so every once in a while, my wife and I will remind each other like, hey, are your signs up? Like, are you remembering who or what is allowed beyond a certain threshold of that? And I like, are you familiar with Greg McKeown in Essentialism? He wrote a great book called Essentialism.
But Essentialism.
Essentialism. It's a great book. And he talks a little bit about like setting those sort of boundaries where it's like, great idea, great thought, love your project, I'm in this other thing, versus going like, well, I can't. So it's being honest and going, I'm choosing not to do that right now because
isn't essentialism another way of saying minimalism? You could relate them too. And then in our line of work, right? What happens when you allow somebody that's not really going to follow through and do the work to work with you?
Oh, yeah, it's a total drain. Yeah.
Yeah, what's funny about direct sales or anybody that runs like an organization of any sort is when you look at what you want more of and what you want less of, everybody wants to be happier, healthier, and wealthier. Everybody wants more free time. They want to make more money in less time and enjoy whatever it is that they enjoy in life. Yeah. So when you say, what do you want less of? They would say things like aggravation and, things that waste my time and all that. And I go, okay, so let's look at that. What wastes your time? And the reason why we get so aggravated with time sucking things is because we okayed it. Mm-hmm. So then you look at your tolerance list. If somebody really wants to thrive in this industry, all they have to do is just take everybody that doesn't follow through and put them on this island over here where they can watch a recording and they can go into action. You put them on the bench. They can come. And what I say to those people is I go, listen, when I played football, when I was younger, my coach would bench me until I did something to prove that I deserved to get off the bench. Yeah. So you're benched right now, but your opportunity is still there. I'm going to work with these people here, my Super Bowl team.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we have to be very careful. And that's why my interface response system is super cool, is because I teach people like this stage and system, which once you get good at it, it happens fast, of just learning how to filter what you allow in your life. And then if you do it right, and this is a big shift because one of the things for me is I used to say yes to everybody because it validated that I was important. Yeah. Oh, you want my help? Absolutely.
Yeah. You want to feel needed. Everybody wants to feel wanted.
Yeah. As long as you tell everybody I'm cool.
Yeah. I did a podcast around everybody wants it, but there's very few that will actually build it. Like everybody wants time freedom. Everybody wants money. Everybody wants, a certain level of whatever their version of success is. And then when it comes down to like boots on the ground, putting in the work, it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. Like, I don't know that I want to do that. And it's like, that's when, for me, that's where very much like you said, like, I'm a huge fan of clarity, and it's like, I'm cool.
Well,
you
who
tell me
is
all
it?
the
Have you
things
ever met?
that you,
Have you ever met someone that says, "I hate clarity"?
well, they will say that they like it. And then when you start to
Right.
press and go, what do you want? And what is that worth to you? And why is that important to you? Because I think a lot of people don't take the time to really sit. And this is one of the things that Greg McKeown talks about in Essentialism is like the need to sit and think and really figure it out. Like, because there's no like tangible value proposition. And like, if people hear, oh, well, what'd you do today? Well, I sat for an hour and I thought. Like, so you were lazy. No, like, there's so much value in just actually thinking and getting clarity on what's important and what does matter. And I think some people just, they're so programmed, or they're so like in this hamster wheel that they don't know that they can or see that they can. And that's sort of what I really want people to recognize is like, we all have the ability and the power to shift that process if we choose to. And so introducing them to people like yourself who they can go listen to, like my biggest hope is that they hear this and then they just go dive into all of your content so that they can get all those nuggets. Because sometimes it's not who they hear it from or what they hear, it's who they hear it from, right? People will hear stuff I say and they'll be like,
everybody says the same thing in their own way.
Yeah. That's how I opened my book. I said, you're going to read this book and you're not going to read anything that's new. This is just how it's helped me and the way that I'm going to choose to present it to you. And maybe that will help you. And this is my way of paying this forward. And I think that's honestly like the biggest thing is how we choose to hear and listen to what people have to say. And then do we take the time to stop and think and go, okay, how do I apply this? Right? Like the whole thing, like knowledge is power. And it's like, yeah, knowledge when applied with wisdom, that's
well. Watch this. Do you ever read the book Indistractable by Nir Eyal?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
That's like a slice of pizza, man. Go get that book, Indistractable by Nir Eyal. Actually, I think I have it right here. He's a friend of mine. He lives in Singapore.
Indistractable.
So dig on this. So all he talks about is, why we get distracted and how to become indistractable, unfuckwithable, right?
Yeah.
He says in this book, in so many words, he says, learning is actually a distraction in the absence of action. And what that means is that everybody that just went to Tony Robbins this weekend to learn and become empowered, but they didn't do anything after, they wasted their time.
And their money.
One of the things that I always tell people after my talks, like I always say at the end, if you learn something today, give it away. And that's how it's going to stay. Like, go do something about it, share it with others. But I think that one of the biggest challenges people have is in the personal growth realm is they're unconscious to the fact that all they're doing is gaining knowledge, but not actually putting it into play.
Yeah.
So, because when you get to the top of the mountain and you interview the top people in your company, they're not special,
Yeah.
and very often they're not even really good at your business, but what they're good at is follow through.
Yeah.
And never quitting. That's their real talent.
Yeah.
And anybody can do that. Anybody can win. But if I stay in learning mode, I'm doing it as if something's going to change that will gift me the ability to be successful. I am successful the moment I decide to be.
Yeah.
So learning is a big, big challenge for people.
Yeah. That's I think, and I always mix up who said what when it comes to the Stoic philosophers, but I remember there's something in there around that, like, don't tell me the books you've read, stop reading all the fancy things and go do, right? Yeah. Like, go take action on those things. Because if you're not doing that, then, like you said, like, it's useless. And so many people, I think, they get in, like we call them seminar junkies, right? Like they're always going to the next thing. They're always going to the next thing.
Have you ever been a seminar junkie?
And
I was.
yeah, well, of course. And then we can only look back only because we've been through that experience and look back and go, oh, I know what that looks like because I was there once. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. Like to your point, they're all saying the same thing. It's just wrapped up in a different package. And it's until you kind of take that and go really put it into action for yourself, then you can put your own flavor. And it all applies differently for each person. You know, your experience is so different than my experience. We could hear the same thing, apply them through our own biases and lenses, and have completely different results.
Go get this book. Go get the book. It's by Daniel Robertson, How to Think Like a Roman. You ever read that?
I've not read it. I have it in a list of books that I need to. I'm in action mode currently. I'm trying to caught myself reading and listening. Like I do the Audible books when I'm at the gym. My wife makes fun of me. She's like, "What's your playlist? Like when you're running or when you're working out?" And I'm like, the Daily Stoic and Tim Ferriss. Like it's not like she doesn't even listen to podcasts. I don't think she's listened to maybe 2 episodes of mine, and it's only because they're friends of hers. Like she's like, I hear you talk all day. I don't need to listen to you.
That's awesome on
your podcast. But I love it, man. I appreciate it.
Great conversation.
Good place to wrap up. What I took from this is go do some work, slow down a little bit, listen to that space.
Take advantage of the space.
Absolutely. Yeah. So guys, I will do I will throw together an intro and an outro on this and talk it up. If you can send me whatever you want in terms of, you know, links and, you know, you got a book coming out soon. So let me know, you know, where that's going to land.
You can people can just go to riseupwithdragon.com.
Cool.
And, you know, I've got an online course called 15 Days of Discipline coming out. They can get on my newsletter. But more important than anything, I think what interests me is people that are seeking, you know, not just knowledge, but people that are waking up and realizing that there's more. I like to think that what my podcast does is I go to that place and talk about the things that they're thinking about. And my hope is that it kind of unlocks them so that they can wake up and realize what you and I have been talking about, that they can choose to create the fantasy of their dreams, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think one of the things I like about your podcast and a lot of the content that I see from you is that it isn't just talk. There's oftentimes practical, applicable things to do.
Thank you.
That allows, because I'm really results oriented. I get the feeling that you are too. Like I want to take something and use it, and then I can see it's like those small wins that help build the confidence. Go, yes,
it might be our last day, man. You know, I want to get some results.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, brother. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to hearing and seeing what else you put out there.
Yeah, man. Let's stay in touch.
We have
a lot in common, and I mean, at least once a year.
At least
on our birthdays.
I dig it. Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Dragon.